do a predetermination hearing to allow the views of the applicant and the committee who have made, and people who have made representations to be heard before a planning decision is taken at planning committee. The application is development of land for residential use at the land to the east of 20 Bankview Terrace, Denny Head, by Barleyfield Developments Limited, P/24/0002/P. Are there any apologies first?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, we have apologies submitted by Bailey Buchanan and Councillors Colley and Sinclair. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Mr. Henderson will read the predetermination hearing procedures. And we'll have slides, yeah.
Thank you, Convener. And if we can move to, I think, the third slide. Thank you. So the first stage in the process this evening is that the Convener will ask the planning officer who has prepared the report that is part of the agenda papers to speak to the report. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Is that? Thank you. The next stage in the procedure is that the Convener will then invite the applicant or the applicant's agent and any statutory consultees to speak in relation to the proposal, and the applicant or their agent will have 10 minutes to speak to the committee, and statutory consultees that wish to speak will each be entitled to speak for up to 5 minutes. Thank you. Next slide. At that stage, there'll be a pause to allow the members of the committee to ask any questions that they wish to ask of the applicant, the applicant's agents, any of the statutory consultees, and members may also ask officers in attendance for advice in factual or legal matters. Thank you. Next slide, please. At that point, the Convener will then invite other parties who have submitted representations, whether that be in support for the application or objectors, to speak to the terms of the submissions that they have made. Thank you. Next slide. In each case, the parties will be allowed up to 5 minutes to speak to their representation. The slide also notes that where there may be repetition, a spokesperson may be invited on behalf of parties with similar interests to speak on behalf of their group. And if there is such a group spokesperson, they would be allowed 10 minutes to speak. Thank you. This slide notes that the Convener, in the interests of the efficiency of business, may limit the number of speakers addressing the hearing on any particular point or topic, and may curtail a speech which repeats a matter in which the hearing has already been addressed. Thank you. At that stage, in the interests of procedural fairness, the applicant or the applicant's agent will have a right to reply to the points that have been made by parties that have presented before the committee. Then members of the committee, members of the committee are able to ask any questions of any party that's been heard at the hearing this evening, or indeed, as earlier, may seek guidance from officers. Thank you. Next slide. As an almost final point in the meeting, the members of the committee, following questions being raised, may identify any planning matters that they wish to see referred to and addressed in the report, which will finally come before the Planning Committee for consideration. And following that, the convener will close the hearing, and there are still some slides to follow, some procedural points. So it's to note that discussion takes place through the convener of the meeting, and this isn't an opportunity for parties to cross-examine each other under any circumstances. And the convener's decision on any matters of procedure and order will be final. Thank you. This is to note that if any party who has indicated that they would wish to attend the hearing this evening does not appear at the hearing, the committee may proceed in any event with the business of the hearing without hearing that party. Thank you. And as I noted earlier, the convener is responsible for ensuring that the hearing is conducted efficiently and also having due regard to the interests of natural justice and the principles of natural justice. Thank you. And the final slide, it is simply to note that, as the convener mentioned earlier, a predetermination hearing is an opportunity for the applicant and the applicant's agent and parties who have submitted representations to be heard by the committee. And it's not the point at which a decision is taken by the committee on the application. That decision would be taken at a future meeting of the Planning Committee. So thank you, and thank you, convener.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I did introduce myself, which is Alf Kelly, Deputy Convener, and we have other members of the committee here, our Provost Robert Bissett in person, Councillor Jim Flynn online, Councillor Gordon Forrest in person, Councillor James Kerr online, Councillor Laura Murtagh online, and Councillor Alan Nimmo online. Officers are Mr. Henderson, who you've just heard from, the Legal and Procurement Manager, Jim Miller, Committee Officer, Brian Perry, Democratic Services Manager, Catherine Chorley, Planning Officer, Ian Dryden, Development Manager, Richard Broadley, Planning and Environmental Manager, Donald Campbell, Development Manager, and David Gray. Is David on? Yeah.
So I think as well.
So thank you for that. Sorry that I missed everybody out. Now I'll ask Catherine to speak to the report, please.
Thanks, convener. Jim, if you could show the location plan for me, please. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. The proposal is being considered at a predetermination hearing because it's considered significantly contrary to the development plan. This is owing to the scale of the proposed housing outside of the village limits and within the Greenbelt and Countryside designations. The boundary of the application site, you can see on the location plan, forms a diamond shape. The eastern boundary runs along the edge of Denny Road, with watercourses running along the northern and southeastern boundaries. The application is for planning permission in principle for residential development. The layout gives an idea of what could come forward if the proposal progresses to a matter specified in conditions application. The indicative number of units is 21. Jim, please could you swap plans for me? Thank you. You can see the proposed indicative layout there. There are a number of historical applications on the site, which include parts of the site, and these have been included in your report in section 3. You can see from this that the site has not been the subject of previous call for sites as part of the local development plan process. Extensive consultations have been carried out, and these are summarised at section 4. Discussions are ongoing in some matters, and particularly into the issues raised in the transport planning comments. It had been hoped that this could be resolved before the meeting today, but that wasn't possible. The public representations, of which there have been 15, are summarised in section 6 of the report. The relevant policies from both National Planning Framework 4 and Local Development Plan 2 are noted at Section 7. Following that, the material considerations are set out at Section 7B. A full assessment of the proposal will be presented back to the Planning Committee at a later date. That's it for me, Convener. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Can we now ask the agent to take a seat and speak on behalf of the applicant? Just introduce yourself and to the committee.
Thank you, Convener. My name is David Jones and I'm agent for the applicants. This planning application in principle for a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom bungalows involves the use of non-productive vacant land in a central location in Denylone Head, close to services, shops and public transport links. The development is targeted primarily at a maturing older market, but not exclusively so, and is without ownership or occupation age restrictions. Our market research highlights an urgent and growing need for smaller, adaptable properties to meet expected demand from an increasing and aging population base. The bungalows will meet all current design requirements of Scottish Government's Housing for Various Needs, and will also meet the latest energy efficient related requirements. The Council's own housing needs and demand assessment identifies a 6% population increase, roughly 10,000, over the next 20 years, with a projected 13% increase in households due to an aging population, migration and demographic change. At 2021, Falkirk had a population of 160,000 persons. Relative to the age structure of the council area, there's a strong representation of people in their late 40s, 50s and 60s. And it is from this group that will mostly require smaller adoptable dwellings as they look to downsize or seek a more convenient, sustainable property choice. Demand for smaller dwellings to meet this need will continue to increase if the desire for independent living into older age continues to grow. Whilst there is increasing recognition at both national and local level for smaller properties, finding appropriate sites with developer interest to meet the Council's 20-minute neighbourhood initiative are limited. This site is ideally placed to meet both need and locational advantages of this planning policy concept. National Planning Framework 4 sets out the Scottish Government policies and proposals for use of land. Policy 16 states development proposals for new homes that improve affordability and choice by being adaptable to changing diverse needs and which address identified gaps in provision will be supported. It further notes that the majority of the population want to remain in their homes as they age, preferring mainstream housing, and so accessible and adaptable homes can allow people to continue to live independently. These proposals will provide much needed smaller residential accommodation within the immediate area and help reduce the shortfall of appropriate housing across the Falkirk area as a whole. The site location is sustainably accessible by public transport and within walking distance of several local amenities, including convenience stores, pharmacy, post office, fast food takeaways and restaurants. The proposals will bring back into use an otherwise disused land area incapable of any form of economic agricultural use, whilst meeting a current need for smaller adaptable homes. The site is self-contained with a clearly defined smaller developable area and limiting external physical boundaries, which will be enhanced with further landscaping. Its development poses no threat to the surrounding productive farmland. Site investigation information, including test borehole drilling, confirms it to be undisturbed ground, free from contamination, and is minerally stable. The site can be accessed safely, and we are currently engaged with officers to resolve several points that will meet requirements for a future detailed layout and visibility displays. Officers already accept that the development will have no noticeable impact on the surrounding road network, and we have agreed to meet all requested contributions for wider road network, school infrastructure, and affordable housing policy requirements. We have also agreed to contribute to the work of the nearby Danylone Head Community Hall Management Committee on the basis of completed units. If planning permission in principle is accepted, the applicant will work with the council and its partners to bring forward detailed proposals at the earliest opportunity, including a construction environmental management plan that will regulate and control all construction operations and associated traffic movements within and out with the site boundary. Thank you. Convene that to me.
Thank you. Well within time. You can take your seat again, please. You can go back to your seat, please. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do any of the statutory consultees have anything to say in the matter at the moment? No? It's no. Okay. Thanks. Members of the public who have made, sorry. Okay. Are there any questions from members of the committee to either the officer or to David? Yes.
Thanks.
Mr. Forrest.
It was actually to the gentleman there. If he could,
Sorry. Just give us a wee minute. Sorry. Exercise is good for you.
thanks.
Okay, Councillor Forrest.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much for that. Very good of you to return, you know. I never caught one of the phrases you said there, and it does concern me because it has been done in the past. And you said that it was aimed, the development would be aimed at older people, but not exclusively. Well, what do you mean by that? Could you tell me?
Basically, councillor, there's no restrictions in terms of anyone who wishes to express an interest or even purchase a property. We're not limiting it by age, and we're making the properties accessible or available to anyone who's looking for a smaller property of this type of design.
That's great, thank you. You know why I was asking that, obviously. It was just, you mentioned age several times in your presentation. Thank you for the clarification. It is just got to make sure that it is completely open to all. So thank you. That was my one and only question to you. Thank you.
Consultations in a strict sense, we've done if you like, our own marketing exercise as a company. We've been looking at what the market is requiring. We are conscious that this type of smaller property is not available in the quantity required to meet this council and every other local authority's needs over the next 10, 15, 20 years. This is a site that's available. We think this would be ideally situated to meet the council's own 20-minute neighbourhood policy requirement. And on that basis, we submitted the application. We've made a presentation to the Community Council, for example, and we've had discussions with the local Community Hall Management Committee, of which you heard about in my presentation. But formal consultations, other than the statutory ones through the planning application, that would cover everything that we've done so far.
So you will be having further consultations with the local. I realise, being there myself, that you've done a presentation to the Community Council, but that was quite a distance from the the actual locality it's being built in or proposed to be built in? Do you intend doing further consultation with the actual residents in that area?
We have nothing programmed on that level, convener. We left it with the community council that we were open to have further discussions should that come forward on that basis. So if the community council feel that was helpful, or then we would be happy to do so.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions? No. This time I can say you can take your seat again. Thanks. Now, can we hear from any objectors or supporters? Yep. Yep. Could you take a seat, please? Just press the wee button. That's it. And you have 5 minutes to make your representation. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, right. My name is Moira Grant. I'm a hedgehog champion with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society and the People's Trust for Endangered Species. And I did submit an objection to the application on 2 grounds. The first of these is in relation to the fact that this is a proposed development in Greenbelt. As I'm sure a lot of members will be aware, the UK is actually one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And one of the reasons for that is the loss of green space. And I understand that this is contrary to the council's own development plans. So in relation to that, the specific ground, the loss of Greenbelt, I would say that in my opinion, I see that the application is described as a retirement village, but I think it's misleading to describe it as that because really there won't be any ownership restrictions on the houses. And so effectively you really just have another housing development, but this time being built in Greenbelt. The houses themselves are going to apparently be small and bungalows, but I mean that type of house doesn't just appeal to older people. And even if they were occupied by older people initially, they could sell them to anyone or they could be transferred on death. So, you know, the justification for the development, if you like, would cease to exist if it even exists in the first place. As I understand it, the government's amended planning guidelines do talk about net zero. However, older people are actually more likely to need private transport. And really, realistically, with this site, all the main services like large shops, hospitals are in either Falkirk or Stirling or further afield. So the net zero argument doesn't really hold up, in my opinion. The planning guidelines also do say that development in Greenbelt is to be limited in any event. And so at the time when members are making the decision, I would then ask them to refuse the application on the ground that it's contrary to the plan in as much as it's in Greenbelt. In relation to my other ground of objection, and I did submit an objection detailing this, and I see that it has been summarised in the report. I just want to reiterate points specifically in relation to hedgehogs, which are my main interest. First of all, the ecological appraisal didn't actually make any reference to these, despite the fact that they are listed as priority species in the Council's Biodiversity Action Plan. And also they are what's known as red listed, which means that they are now classed as vulnerable to extinction in the UK. And that's an official classification, the IUCN's Red List of British Mammals. Now, hedgehogs are actually highly mobile animals. They travel between 1 and 2 kilometres a night, and they are known to frequent this site. But they don't just travel between individual gardens, they travel in a landscape context. And so loss of a site like this would not just affect hedgehogs on the site, but they would also affect hedgehogs over a larger area. So I think the other parts of my objection, the fact also that there wasn't really proper consultation with any wildlife groups, as far as I'm aware. There's actually a wildlife centre virtually opposite the site, and no one there, that's the Eden Animal Sanctuary and Wildlife Centre, no one there was consulted or knew anything about the application. I'm also a member of Falkirk Wildlife Conservation Group, and again, they hadn't been consulted either. So the ecological appraisal is not really comprehensive. So on behalf of a species which has existed for millions of years in the UK and which is now sadly at risk of extinction in the UK, I would ask that when the decision is made that members would refuse the application on that ground as opposed to the other ground, or on both grounds, depending on how members were minded. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much for coming along. Would the applicant's agent, Mr. Jones, would you like to, sorry?
Yet.
Not quite yet. Oh, sorry, there's a, I believe there's another objector is online. Yeah. Which one?
Sir Kerr's got his hand up.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Kerr, Councillor Kerr, Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I just, probably the applicant's agent would probably answer the question. The objector just came in and says that it was a care village, and I don't think that's what the applicant says when he put his submission in. That was maybe a previous thing, but there's no restriction to age. I'm sure that's what Councillor Forrest already asked the gentleman. I just wanted the clarification of that. That was all.
Yeah, I think we can clarify that. The answer to Councillor Forrest was that it's not a care village. Okay.
Yep, thanks, convener.
Yeah. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, convener. And I think that's a point that perhaps the applicant's agent could pick up during the opportunity for a right to reply to the parties, interested parties who are speaking to their representations. Thank you, convener.
Louise Montgomery, online. Yep, I see you.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Can hear you fine, thanks.
Yeah, my camera's not working, so I'm not going to be able to put that on, I'm afraid. I'm a resident, me and my husband are a resident in the local area, and we also object to this for a few reasons. First of all, when talking about consultation with the local area, I know that the planning developers went to the community council, but this wasn't really made clear to the local residents at all. I actually saw about the meeting on Facebook the day of the meeting, and that was the first time that I'd heard about it. So it would be, we would like it if there was more opportunity for consultation for that. In terms of reasons why we object, we live just opposite the site here, and the road on that road there is very busy. So it's a 30-mile-an-hour road, but if anybody drives past it, you'll know that a lot of people don't do 30 miles an hour on that road, and the road is busy enough with traffic from the motorway that comes through that way. If this village was to be put there, there would be more traffic going on the road, which would then become an issue, particularly when the primary school's just up the road there, and there's a lot of children walking on that road to and from school. Like the objector before said as well, the area is a green belt, so there's lots of nature there that would be removed if the development was to go forward. So, for example, there's lots of deer that stay there, so there's a whole family, I suppose you would say, of deer there that have actually located there because of buildings in other areas. And if that was to be built on, then they would obviously lose their habitat. Local services in the area are already fairly stretched. In fact, they're very stretched. So I had to book a doctor's appointment, and it was 2 weeks already for a doctor's appointment in the local area. With extra population there, particularly if it is an elderly population, that's going to put further strain on those services, but also services such as the school, the primary school up the road, which is at capacity. The building work on the road would cause major obstruction because of where it is and because the road's so busy. If vehicles were trying to get in and out when the building work was taking place, that would cause major disruption, particularly because most of the houses here don't have drives, so cars are parked on the road, and then obviously there'd be the work vehicles there as well. And just regarding the category that is targeted towards older people, again, I think that's probably a bit misleading, because if anybody's able to buy a house there, then it's obviously open to anybody buying that. So to assume that older people would want to buy it or be able to buy it maybe isn't actually correct. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your contribution. Moving into David Jones. Do we have Gillian McDonald online?
Hi there, it's Gillian and Alistair McDonald, but I'm afraid I didn't manage to type that in properly. Can you hear me okay?
That's fine, we can hear you, thanks.
Thank
All right,
you.
go ahead.
And weirdly enough, my camera is playing up as well, so there's obviously something going on. I'd like to speak up in support of the development. My wife and I both live in the immediate area. We both have elderly parents who live in the area as well. And we're actually in the process of considering trying to find a suitable bungalow accommodation for one of our parents, and it is extremely difficult. I think that the agent got it absolutely right when they identified we have an elderly and growing elderly population with an increased demand, and for me it's about supporting their ability to continue independent living and living in the community that they've lived in all their lives. And I think that's really vital. And I think from my point of view that this style of housing, which is quite rare in the area, is really needed. And it would allow our parents to stay self-sufficient as long as possible. And that's really important to us. I think it would probably also draw on the fact that I appreciate absolutely the regulatory aspect of the application and the green belt that it refers to. But I probably would also ask you to look at the map that was brought up immediately before the start of the meeting, which indicated it leads onto Glasgow Road. The opposite side of that road is the town of, or the village of Head of Muir, or Denelon Head, depending on which point of it you're on. And so whilst it is Greenbelt, it is immediately adjacent to the main road. So it's not in the middle of a kind of beauty spot or out of town or everything. It's been a development. In terms of the size of the development, 20 houses, I appreciate there will be some demand, but as a personal note, if my mother-in-law moves to it, she's going to move a distance of about 500 metres. She'll still use the same facilities. She'll still go to the same doctor. I appreciate there may be some change, but for 20 houses, I wouldn't imagine the impact would be that great. Appreciating also the elderly aspect to it. It may well attract other people, or it may not. But obviously, I'm sure we can't stipulate that. I suppose just that, in conclusion, I just think it would be something that would really support our needs, the needs of the elderly population. And considering its location, it's perfect. It's on a main bus route. It's immediately adjacent to a shop and other facilities. So from our point of view, it would be perfect. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks very much, Mr. McDonald. Right. Okay, Mr. Jones, as the applicant's agent, would you like a right of reply to what you've heard?
Thank you again, Convener. Just if I can run through some of the points that have been raised in the last few minutes. First of all, this is a simple, straightforward residential development. There will be no age restrictions. These properties will be open to anyone who chooses or is looking for a smaller home on a small plot. Access road, we've heard some commentary in relation in terms of how busy it is. Your own roads transportation officials have looked at this. There's nothing in principle that would prevent development going ahead. There are some details which we are intending to take through this coming week, in fact, with your roads officials to resolve any outstanding matters. Following that, we would hope to get a sign-off on the basis of the access road arrangements. Greenbelt and nature, I can take those 2 points together if I may. The area has clearly got a Greenbelt designation attached to it. From a developer's point of view, we believe that the introduction of National Planning Framework 4 requires all councils to look more carefully at locations so close to existing town and village centres. This site fits that bill. We believe it would help support the existing community. It would help support use of existing services, shops and facilities. And on that basis, we feel it worthwhile. The nature comments, and particularly hedgehogs, I've replied to your case officer on the basis that our first ecological survey was prepared as a baseline survey, and upon that there will be it is open to the council to apply or attach planning conditions requiring further information to be brought forward, particularly before construction work start, should the council move to detailed planning consent. And I think the background report itself confirms there is no schooling issues at the moment, nor is there any projected shortfalls. And in relation to building and construction works, the next detailed phase of this operation would require a construction environmental management plan that would assess and provide details of how the construction phase would take place. We believe on that basis, convener, this is an application to be supported. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Now, does any member of the committee have any questions for any of the people who have already spoken? Well, this
is a question for yourself. How many of the units will be for social housing?
We've seen from the background report there will be a requirement on the basis of 21 units that 3 of those would be for social housing.
Okay. So these will be for rent for anybody, really?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So in regarding the hedgehogs, I presume Moira's done a study and there's hedgehogs there, but so let's say there's hedgehogs there. What can a developer do to protect them?
Well, there are various mitigation measures that can be brought forward prior to the construction phase. First of all, you would identify where the hedgehog runs are. Introduction of hedgehog hotels, basically, where you provide nesting sites and safe and secure areas for the hedgehogs to pass through. We heard from the previous contributor that hedgehogs can travel at some distance. So we would see this particular site linking into that network so the hedgehogs will not be disturbed in terms of what they would do naturally.
Right. So you would liaise with sort of Moira's organisation or such like to ensure that if there's a lot of hedgehogs there that it'd be protected?
Happy to do so, convener.
Okay. Thank you.
Very much, Provost. Sorry. Thanks very much, Provost. Anyone else? Any questions? No? Thanks again. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Jones. Now, members may identify any planning issues that they wish to see addressed with the officer's report to the committee. If there's anything anyone wishes to raise at this time.
Is there anyone here for roads that might like to make some commentary on the roads?
Is there anyone from roads?
Maybe Craig would like to make a comment.
you like to make any comment on it? Yeah, Craig?
Hi, convener. Through you, the only comment we would make would be to refer you to the report. The consultations are mentioned in there. Happy to take any questions on that.
Any questions? So, no? Okay, Councillor Flynn?
Yep, thank you, convener. One question on the road stroke transport and another question regarding the schooling. If I deal with the roads transport, it mentions in the report that 4.14 that the site has to be easily serviced by a 12-metre long refuse vehicle. Based on the plans that we see there, or has there been any discussion to ensure that this plan meets that requirement, that the vehicles can access, get in and get out of the site easily, bearing in mind the size of the vehicle?
So to Mr. Russell, yeah.
Convener, can I speak on behalf of TPU?
Sure.
Thank you. The applicant has submitted swept path analysis demonstrating that the junction is almost right size for accommodating a refuse vehicle, although no plans have been submitted to demonstrate a refuse vehicle can get in and through the site, primarily because it's an outline planning application, so the detail hasn't been submitted. We have gone back to the applicant to request that further tracking is undertaken and to support amendments to the access junction.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, convener. My second question really relates to Denny High School. It says, sorry, I'm just getting the page, that planned growth in the Denny High catchment area is expected to put pressure on the school longer term, and this requires the school to be extended. Do we, or could we have for the next meeting, do we know what the actual current capacity is and what the planned growth is, either including or excluding this site, should it be granted permission? To see what the actual numbers are, because I think it's quite important to have these set of numbers, convener. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, totally. Is there any full education online? No. No, so we'll have to bring that back to.
Okay, thank you.
When the floor planning comes through. Okay, thanks, Mr. Councillor Flynn. Yeah. I don't think there's any other hands, any other questions. So, yeah. So that's us at the close of the meeting. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending, and have a good evening. Bye.
Thanks, Convener.